Thank you all for joining us for our inaugural Serve with Purpose Lunch and Learn. We appreciate you all being here. Serve with Purpose is my brainchild that comes from a deep desire to help those in local government lead themselves well so that they can better lead communities and the people that they serve. Today, we're going to talk about running meetings, and most public meetings don't fail because of bad intentions. They fail because of lack of structure. So the purpose of today's training is to give you a few practical things you can do immediately to run meetings that are clear, compliant, and actually productive for both your board and the public. The goal for today's time together is knowing the rules, your rules and responsibilities, touching on parliamentary procedures, staying compliant with sunshine law, a discussion about public comment, which could be really interesting, of course, and knowing how to speak, act, and lead effectively. This is how we're going to get there. We have a simple agenda, and I'm going to introduce the panelists, and Ben Kafferlin is going to give a little bit of a presentation, and then we're going to go into a lot of Q&A, and this will be we want to hear your questions, so please put them in the chat. We want participation. We'll wind down questions towards the end of the hour, and because we like meetings that begin on time, we also like the ones that end on time, so we will end promptly at 1 o'clock. We are recording so that anything said here will be public, and that means you'll also get access to it in the future. Ben, are we recording? I want to introduce our panelists today. We have an experienced lineup this afternoon with my partner, Ben Kafferlin, presenting. He's a former county commissioner, chairman, and has served on many boards. Ben and I own Kafferlin Strategies, our management consulting firm, as well as Civil Link, our software development company, which is today's sponsor. And together we provide consulting and agenda management software to dozens of boards. We're also joined by Mary Ann Manano, who is a city manager and part-time consultant with Kafferlin Strategies. We have attorney Jim Dennison. He has been a municipal solicitor for over 40 years, and he is a wealth of information. We're also joined by Chelsea Puff, who's our program director at Kafferlin Strategies, and she has a long resume and local government experience, and she'll be moderating the comments. And maybe Nicole Heminger is going to join us. She's our chief clerk, our development director, and they will also be future presenters. These folks have a long line of qualifications, but I need to give you a warning. They are not your attorney or your auditor or your therapist. So you need to make sure that you consult your professionals for any of your certain situations. We also want you to know that we want you to mark your calendars for some upcoming events. We will do this on the third Wednesday of every month. And next month, we will talk about planning with purpose, getting your board and manager priorities aligned. So stay tuned for more information in early May. Ben, take it away.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Very good. So good afternoon. I'm going to spend 5 minutes covering some basics and then go into 15 common mistakes that I see in 10 minutes. And so I'll wrap up at 12:20. But if you want to go into a little bit more depth, I did an hour-long training a couple of years ago that is on YouTube and free for anyone to view. It's specifically on parliamentary procedure, which I know is so much fun. And, you know, I bet you can't wait to get out of the meeting so you can go take this training on parliamentary procedure, but it is free on YouTube. Just search for Kafferlin parliamentary procedure, should pop right up. So how many of you have been in a board meeting that was frustrating to you? because it was a waste of time. Maybe it was just a complaint fest. Decisions were deferred, unclear. Maybe you walk away from the meeting and it is completely unclear to you as even the chairperson or the secretary taking the minutes what was decided. And then once a few of those meetings happen, turnout declines, and you have a fear of attending meetings. That tells me a lot about how the meeting is being run. The way most meetings are run lose sight of the fact that you are there to make decisions. And because it's a government entity, you're there to make transparent decisions. Meetings are not supposed to be a complaint fest. It's not an investigation. We're not there to make sure that everyone feels good. It is to make decisions in public. And your culture, your procedures, your agendas, everything should be driving towards that primary goal. And we have to understand that decisions won't be perfect. And in fact, this is one of those instances where good decisions being made is sometimes the enemy of the perfect. So it's not that the decision has to be right, but you do have to make the decision correctly. And sometimes that means going back and overriding a decision in the past. But I think what I'm really trying to impress is that the single best thing you can do to make a well-run meeting is be clear that a decision was made and what that decision was. Because it's far easier to go back and change a clear decision than it is to be unclear. And that is why you need to know the rules. Senator Tom Coburn told me this in a leadership training seminar years ago, and it has served me very well. Because I, as a former chair of a commissioner board, knew the law, I knew parliamentary procedure, because I knew those rules, no one could push me around. I was confident because I'd read, Robert's rules and Rosenberg rules and whatever. I'd read the state law related to county code and now boroughs and townships and cities. And as a consequence, people couldn't push me around. And that's why that is one of the serve with purpose principles. Know the rules, the laws that are relevant to your government, your own ordinances, parliamentary procedure, be a sponge and know the rules. If there's one thing I could say, it would be that. So basic principles of how to run a meeting. First of all, motions should be received with full debate if desired. That doesn't mean you have to have debate over every little thing. But basic principle number one is that when you go to make a motion, it should be debated unless it's not debatable, which I can get into later. Identical motions must not be brought forth in the same meeting once a decision has been made. That person, I'm sure you've all had one who doesn't like the answer, and so they just keep bringing the thing back up again and again. That's not proper. A motion to reconsider cannot be brought up by a no vote. So if you have a 5-person supervisor board, one person votes no, and then they start bringing up a motion to reconsider. That's also not cool. Personal remarks are always out of order. There should only be one speaker at a time. Which is very hard sometimes to keep, but it's really important for note taking and decision making. And finally, the decision of the group is the decision of the whole, including those who oppose it. Brief little story, there were many times where we voted on something and I didn't support it, but I was overruled, and so I signed the resolution or whatever. That was confusing to people. I just want to spend a few seconds on how an agenda item, like the process by which it should walk through, because there's so much confusion around this. And I want to be clear about it now so that when we get into the Q&A part, we're off to a good start. So first of all, there should be a presentation of what is being requested. And then the chair you should get the attention of the chair, be recognized to make a motion. That needs to be seconded. The chair should be restating the motion so that it's clear what they're talking about. Have any discussion or debate about it then, restate the motion, and then call for a vote and declare the decision. Many chairs neglect a bunch of those steps. And so if I could print one thing out and put it in front of every chair, it's that, because often there'll be a debate over, well, we shouldn't be discussing this yet because there's no motion on the floor. Well, you can have a presentation before but you shouldn't be debating the merits of it until there's a motion made and seconded. That's true. So much confusion comes when the chair doesn't restate the motion, so people don't know what they're voting on. And it's hard sometimes to decide what was actually decided if the chair doesn't declare what was decided. So let me get into the 15 things in 10 minutes. And these are non-exhaustive. I have many things that I've seen gone rogue over the last 15 years. But I think these are the ones that are going to give us a good basis for a conversation for the rest of the meeting. So first of all, so many people think that Robert's Rules of Order is like the law. And I want to be clear that Robert's Rules of Order is not state law, is not your law, and they can be completely modified to fit your situation. I actually don't think, and we can have a debate about this later, but I don't think Robert's Rules of Order is actually a good parliamentary procedure for most local governments in Pennsylvania. And the reason is because it is written for large groups. And so I actually, when I'm asked, advise people to take a look at Rosenberg's Rules of Order, because they are made more for a small board, like 3 to 12 member boards. So you should be setting your parliamentary procedure at your reorganizational meeting. I'd suggest you take a look at Rosenberg's, but most importantly, you can modify or create as many local rules about how your parliamentary procedure works as you like. So don't get pushed around by the policy wonk that comes to your meetings and raises heck. Second of all, I'd like to just upfront say what my first solicitor told me, which is it's all fun and games while you agree. That won't be for long. Parliamentary procedure matters because you're going to find conflict points. And when you know the rules and the rules are established, then you can have good debate without it becoming a mess. I've seen many times where that person that's tired of debate, the director style person, wants to call the question. And so they scream, "Call the question. I call the question," as if that's supposed to end the debate. And the only person that can call the question is the person running the meeting. And so understand that calling the question or saying, "I call the question," does not end debate. It's up to the chair whether it's time to end the debate or not. Here's a common one. How many of you have people that make motions to table? Here's the thing, it's not technically being used correctly. A motion to table by all parliamentary procedure that I'm aware of means to set something down, but you're going to pick it back up in the same meeting. What most people are actually talking about is to postpone, and I think that that is a much stronger motion. A motion to postpone can either be indefinite or it can be to a certain time. And I think that's just so much clearer for the note takers and for everybody that needs to understand, are we tabling? Are we setting aside so that we're going to pick it back up in this meeting? Are we postponing it indefinitely, meaning we don't want to bring this back up? Or are we seriously considering this, but it needs to be postponed to a certain meeting for some reason? Next, have you had somebody that's wishy-washy, that doesn't want to take a stand, and so they just abstain? Or they feel like they don't have the information they need to make a decision, but they don't want to hold up the work, so they politely think that they're doing something good by abstaining. Technically, an abstention should only be made when you have a conflict of interest, and you need to state what that conflict of interest is, whether you're gaining financially, personally, or your family. This is not an easy cop-out. You're supposed to give a reason. If you don't feel comfortable making an affirmative vote, then the vote should be no, not I abstain. Seconds do or don't matter. So there's a lot of misconception that if you have a motion that was approved and the second wasn't recorded, that it's invalidated. And that is definitely not the case. If you make a motion, it passes, and then someday in the future, you're looking back on the minutes and note there was no second, it doesn't really matter. You don't even have to record who seconded the vote technically by most parliamentary procedure. But seconds do matter, of course, because that's how you make sure that stuff's not coming to the agenda and getting voted on that nobody wants to talk about except for one person. So you should be making seconds, but just because you didn't record how that happened does not invalidate it. Parliamentary procedure should never be used as a weapon. And I know that that's tempting at times, but I've seen plenty of instances where someone reads up on the rules in order to come to the meeting and like trounce their opponent. And I just want to say that that is contrary to the spirit of parliamentary procedure. These rules are meant to be enabling, not a weapon. So know the rules so you can stand on your own and push back for what's good. Do not use motions to intimidate fellow people on your board. There's this common misconception that the mover of a motion gets to speak first and last. They should be given the opportunity to be the first speaker. So if I make a motion, the floor, and then someone seconds it, the chair should give me the opportunity to speak first because I'm the one that's making the motion. I'm the one that has the legislative intent that needs to be expressed. However, you don't actually get to necessarily come back. If the chair wants, they can just say, you have one shot to make your case for or against, and then move on. Restating motions. It's sad how little restating of motions happens. The chair should be, once a motion is made and seconded, re-saying exactly the motion back. And this is important too, because not only for clarity, but so many times someone will make a motion and they start rambling on. Have you had that happen? Where somebody says, I make a motion to, and by the way, and this is why, and Aunt Gertrude said, well, most of that was not the motion. And so we need to be clear what the motion is, and the chair restating it then ensures that the note taker got it right and assures the person that made the motion that they got it right, and everyone knows what they're talking about. Old business. So very technically, old business is not really a parliamentary procedure term. It's actually unfinished business, which I think is clearer. So generally, I advise that your agendas say that. New business and unfinished business. And that really denotes that you're talking about things that have not yet been decided, rather than old business, which could just mean I'm pulling from anything in the universe that I've ever talked about in a meeting. I think it's clearer to say unfinished business. Commonly hear people say, I make a motion to, and you really can just more simply say, I move. And again, be succinct, make a clear motion, and just present the facts, exactly what you're trying to say, and be done. By the way, a little plug for CivilLink, we have a software package called CiviDocs, which has a built-in feature that specifically writes down what the motion should be before the meeting so that everyone knows exactly what the expected motion is. I have had many chairs that after a vote has been taken say, so moved. So moved is the term that makes a motion. It is not what you should be saying once something's been voted on. It should be, you should be saying the motion carries at the conclusion, not so moved. And just a couple of other things, and then I'm going to wrap up and get into the Q&A. The chair is not always the final decider on what should be done. So generally, you're electing a chair, and the chairperson's responsible for running the meeting well. And if you as a board member disagree with a decision or don't feel heard, you can make a point of order. You can move to appeal. You can take the responsibility away from the chair to decide whatever you're arguing over and bring it to the whole body. Anyone can do that at any time. Election of officers. You do not need a second when you go to have nominations. You just need to take a open up the floor for nominations. Anyone can nominate anyone or themselves. You don't need seconds for that. And finally, it is not kosher to proceed without a quorum. I think most governments get that, but I've seen it happen where people will say, oh, there's not a quorum, but I'm just going to make a motion to proceed without a quorum. Well, nothing said after that point is valid. So a quorum must be present for there to be any decisions made. I want to end my portion of the presentation by giving you this quote from Major Roberts, who was the one that created Robert's Rules of Order. He said, where there is no law, but every man does what is right in his own eyes, there is the least of real liberty. You see, rules and teaching people the rules feels restrictive. It feels like you're curbing their liberty to, I don't know, have public comments, or, you know, name any of the reasons of whether those rules might feel restrictive. Like, try stopping the public from having excessive public comment. That feels like it's restriction. It feels like anti-liberty. But when you have no rules and you let people run roughshod over everyone, you're actually trampling everybody else's liberty. So laying down the rules consistently is actually long-term kindness. So thanks for listening. I'm excited to get into the Q&A.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. I learned some things. I wanted to ask Mary Ann if she would be take our first question that I want to dish out to her. I want to know what she feels like running a meeting running smoothly and efficiently. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think for running smoothly and efficiently, that it comes with some work on the back end of it, both by staff and council, committee, supervisors, that everybody's read the material for the meeting ahead of time, I think is of the utmost importance. And then have also been given the opportunity to ask questions of the manager or the secretary ahead of the meeting. So the manager or the secretary isn't blindsided by a question that may take a little bit of research to answer fully, and give both supervisors, council, and the public a true answer.
Thank you. Attorney Dennison, would you like to comment on that from the attorney's perspective?
The only thing I thought about this earlier, I think that one of my pet peeves is when you have a president or chairman of the meeting and all they do is conduct them. I think they believe they need to just conduct a meeting. I think if you're elected as the chairman or president and conducting the meeting, you need to take a much greater role, you know, with your manager, if you have a manager, putting the agenda together, making sure that, you know, you have a strong committee structure and that your committee people are actually doing the work they need to be doing, and just moving things forward. But the worst thing I see is a person who feels that they're elected just to conduct a meeting, and I see that fairly frequently, unfortunately. But the president or chairman, whoever conducts the meeting, just needs to take a greater role in making sure things are being done. And I also like a lot of things that Ben said. I was even writing down notes here that, you know, a lot of these municipalities just aren't, you need to follow the rules to a certain extent, not go crazy over them. But, you know, I thought, Ben, you made some really good points today too. So
Thanks.
Thank you. You both.
If I could just interject, that is a common thing that I've seen where not so much people in the government, but people in the audience will say, hey, the president is not supposed to vote.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, parliamentary procedure does say that, actually. There's supposed to be a tie-breaking vote. But in government, that is not the case. The chairman, president, supervisor, whatever, they do have the right to vote and should.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you both touched on was a strong committee structure. So, Mary Ann, I was wondering if you could talk about the committee structure that you work within, or what you think is the appropriate structure to enhance the meetings and people to do that work ahead of time.
So where I work, it's a third-class city. So we have a strong manager form of government along with the council. So I, as the manager, create the agenda with some consultation with the mayor, and everything goes out to council ahead of time, usually at least 48 hours, if not 72 ahead of time. So they have time to review all of the materials. And then really it's a lot of the back end work of prepping new council members on, hey, this is how your role and what it looks like. And it goes on consultations with our attorneys and and what third class city code really means as far as running a meeting. You know, the mayor and I will give each other looks if I need her to kind of move along. So she knows what those looks are. But I never am very cautious in a public setting of not overstepping my role, because the mayor is the one that leads the meetings. But, you know, working out those nuances of signals and things like that to keep things along and in line really helps.
Yeah, thank you. Attorney Dennison, I wanted to ask you what you feel is important that should and shouldn't be in the meeting minutes.
Well, I've seen both ends where there's very little in the minutes, and then you see where it's a verbatim minutes. Certainly not verbatim. I think you just need to summarize, you know, if somebody's there commenting, make sure you get their name and, you know, basically what their comment is, just so people know, you know, certainly the motions and who seconded, but just don't get too wordy. They don't have to be, you know, cover everything. And I mean, I know a lot of people will record the meeting and then almost go verbatim, but you certainly don't need that. I think you just need a watered down version of, you know, the important information that comes up during the meeting. And that's something that your secretary needs to sort out a little bit. So you just don't want to get too in depth on everything either. So certainly make sure you state the motions correctly. I think that's kind of Ben's point. That's, you know, very important. I also agree with Ben on restating your motion. A lot of chairmen don't do that, but that is, you know, extremely helpful, especially for whoever's taking the minutes for the meeting. So also it provides that good record where you can look back and see what was actually done. So a lot of Ben's point were, you know, in response to that. So yeah, I just you know, not too specific, but, you know, just give the important information I think that's relevant.
Hey, Lisa, we had a hand a few moments ago.
I just saw that. Hey, Seth, let's hear your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I don't have much experience being a voting member, but I was briefly on city council in St. Mary's, and I was a voting member of the retirement board in Elk County while I was chief clerk. The one question I never really got an answer to, not that I looked that hard into, is what are the practical effects of this? To state differently, if you mess this up or the board you are on messes this up, what can happen to a motion or a resolution or an ordinance legally? Like, put aside the fact that I do agree this makes meetings run better and keeps the public better informed. But, you know, if I take more of a cynical eye to it, why does this truly matter at the end of the day?
Attorney Dennison, would you like to answer that question?
You know, it truly matters. I think your minutes are considered a permanent record for the municipality. You're not allowed to, you know, destroy them or get rid of them. Certainly all your ordinances need to be technically in an ordinance book so people know what to follow. If you screw up something on an ordinance, usually somebody has about 30 days if it's a procedural thing to challenge it. If they don't, then it's considered in effect. I mean, you need to have good ordinance writing. Your ordinances should be written by an attorney, not by a committee member, not by your code enforcement officer, because I've seen things messed up whenever you have non-attorneys actually preparing your ordinances. They just don't understand the little nuances with it. So if you want to mess things up, then have somebody other than an attorney do your preparation of ordinances. That's probably the biggest mistake that I've seen made. And then you get to, you know, I wasn't involved in the preparation of some of these ordinances. Then you get to a meeting, they're trying to enforce it, and it's basically unenforceable. It's just, you know, they just did it incorrectly. That happens more than you would think. So, I mean, it's important what you do at a meeting. I mean, it's, you need to understand what's happening, clear motions, all that kind of stuff. So, it's okay to question things too. That's the big thing. If you don't understand something, make sure you know, raise your hand, ask questions about it. And I prefer somebody who's cynical and who will ask questions of me or of others. And, you know, that's always appreciated on council. Even if I may not agree with them, you know, still bring it up as long as you believe it's in the best interest of the council as a whole or whatever, that certainly welcome those types of conversations.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that a little bit. I think from experiences that I've witnessed, it's not so much that things become illegal or your criminal penalties or civil penalties or anything like that. But it comes in the fact of you're incurring more time. So if you have to go back and re-advertise an ordinance that wasn't advertised properly, there's a time and a monetary commitment. That tends to actually be the biggest issue with doing this in an improper fashion that I've seen.
Thank you. Do you write your ordinances and have your solicitor review, or do you let them craft them for you? Sorry.
Yes, it's not uncommon here for staff to actually write all of the ordinances, and then even present it to council for a discussion point, and then the solicitor will review for final.
Mm-hmm.
But some managers know more what's going on. I think, some like where you are, Mary Ann, is a little more, higher level of things. And, you don't always get those in these rural communities where people really know what's going on. Some of these managers have really good training. Some don't. Some are just declared to be managers. And the people that are writing some of these ordinances just shouldn't be writing them. And I think things must be a little different in Meadville. But because they make changes they just shouldn't make. It's just, it really messes things up, especially rural communities. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Chelsea, I saw that you had something you wanted to comment about that. Would you like to jump in?
No, I just added to the chat. I think if you don't get this right, or if you have a history of not getting this right, it does erode the public's trust in you, your processes, your council, your governance. So it isn't something to take lightly on the ordinance perspective, following that process as it's outlined based upon your municipal classification in terms of advertising, drafting, having the public hearings. All of that's really important for you to maintain that public trust. And make sure that everything goes off without a hitch. So it's really important to have that collaboration with your solicitor as well, because they're going to advise you on the legal ramifications of not getting that right.
Thank you for that.
We do have a hand, Lisa.
Okay. Joe, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so a form of government such as what Mary Ann is in, like a council, a manager council form of government, or somebody who is a paid person who is the head but not a voting member, how much should they kind of drive the discussion at the council level or at the public hearing level or public meeting level of the process? Are they should they take more of a backseat, or should they be leading those discussions?
So I guess I'll answer from my perspective. For this, for my situation, it's still that the mayor is running the meetings and drives all of the discussions, call for motions. She and I have a great relationship, so we discuss what's going to happen about each motion, if it's particularly complicated, especially, and kind of go over a game plan for each of those items beforehand. If there's something about details that are being missed by the council discussion, I will interject and fill those gaps in as necessary, but I really try to take a back seat and let the mayor and council kind of run the discussion.
Thank you. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on public comment because I know we've worked in a lot of communities where public comment can get contentious or sometimes be a way off topic. And so, Mary Ann, would you just give us a little bit of brief about how you handle public comment with how you handle it in the room, how you handle it if people are talking about things that don't pertain to anything you have control over.
Yeah, so we have two separate sections for public comment, one at the beginning of the meeting that's specifically related to agenda items, one at the end for non-agenda items, a public comment policy that's plastered everywhere, the website, the agenda. We have somebody that takes people's names for public comment as soon as they walk in, and that person tells the individual the time limit on their subject. So we have a pretty good handle, and it's been a long-standing policy here. So we have a pretty good handle on that. True, some people get a little out of hand with it, and we will bring out a timer if we think that the topic is going to be particularly contentious, and show them the timer so they know. And the mayor does a fairly good job of keeping folks within that time limit. If something goes out of time limit, the mayor tends to interject and say, this might be a further discussion you need to have with me as the mayor or the manager, as a more one-on-one type discussion. And then if it gets really bad, we've had people throw things at the council. The solicitor then steps in and takes the lead on that.
I have never been in a meeting where the community has been throwing things at the board.
Rental
Okay.
inspection programs will do that to you.
You're missing out, Lisa.
I guess. I don't think I want to be there. So I think one of the things about public comment is we do, as a board, want to make sure people feel heard. But one of the things that happens in communities is the back and forth. Sometimes, how do you manage the back and forth from really not happening? And do you follow up with public comment, beyond the meeting?
Yeah, again, for us, the back and forth is really curtailed by the policy that we've had in place. So that's really important to have. Also, council has been trained enough to not to engage, right? Just listen. Their role at that point in time is to just listen, thank folks for their feedback. If it does require follow-up, either, I sense that this is something I need to follow up on and explore that afterwards, or council will say, can you follow up on this? And that's usually how that works for us.
Thank you. Anybody have questions on public comment?
I have one, which is somewhat a practical and somewhat a legal question. So I'll get Marianne and Jim on this. Oh, when I was a chair, I actually allowed the public to comment on every time we were going to take a vote. Now, I don't know that that's legally required, but there also didn't have a lot of situations where people were giving excessive comment either. I certainly agree there should be no back and forth, but do you think it's a best practice or is it a bad practice? Does the law really is the case law even weighing in much on this? Should you have people have the ability to give public comment on each vote, or do you really think it should be limited to agenda item only at the beginning of the meeting and or just general public comment at the end?
I certainly wouldn't want people to comment before every motion. Having the comment at the beginning of the meeting is certainly what's required by law. You have the right to limit that. If it's going to, some communities, if it's more than 4 people, they limit it to 5 minutes each, and then otherwise it might be 10 minutes. And they have a big timer on the wall so you know what's going on. So if you change your agenda in the middle of a meeting by motion, I think the law requires under sunshine law that at that point you would give the public an additional opportunity to comment on the new agenda item. I think we're all aware of the change in the law last fall about changing agenda items and then posting it on your bulletin board the next day. So that's really the only other time. My other comment is if somebody's just there to cause trouble, you certainly don't engage. I agree with Mary Ann. But if, you know, there are some people that you treat them kind of the way they treat you. Somebody, you can comment during the comment period, but I would caution, again, train your counsel to limit that. If you wanted to have something special came up and you want to allow different public comment in the middle of the meeting, there may be times where that's appropriate. I normally wouldn't want to see it though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think it's an ideal situation because then you're setting precedent of allowing folks to have an input on every single motion or make a comment on every single motion. And then, you know, commissioners change, council changes, and they don't like that. Then you set this precedent that that's how it's going to continue. Yeah, I agree. I don't think I would like to see that.
Thank you both. Attorney Dennison, you touched on sunshine law when you were talking about commenting on that. And so I was wondering if you could share with us some of the most common Sunshine Act mistakes so that we can make sure that our communities are not doing those things.
If you have a public website or a Facebook page or whatever, you need to be posting your agenda. You know, a lot of people have municipalities have the ability to do that, but don't. I think the sunshine law pretty much requires you to do that. And if you don't do that, then somebody could come along and challenge what you do at the meeting as not being properly posted. You can amend the agenda up to 24 hours before the meeting. If it goes beyond the 24 hours, you can, with the change in case law, you can amend it during the meeting. You would do a motion to amend the agenda. You'd need a second, and then approval of the motion to amend the agenda item. And at that point, as soon as you approve that motion, would be the time to open up the public comment before you really have any further discussion on it or adopt, any changes due to that agenda item. So that's a new area that I don't think a lot of municipalities are used to yet, but certainly is a change in law that I was happy with. Because a lot of times things come up maybe the night before and it's within the 24 hours, and how do you deal with it? And then of course you have that person in the audience who is watching your agenda and the time it's posted, and you're going to see comments on Facebook page the next day about how you violated the sunshine law. The other thing I think that when you have executive sessions, I try to stick to the true subject that is allowable for executive session. I do not, if counsel or whoever gets off on a tangent on something else, I try to steer them back to, what is truly the subject matter for the executive session. But I also believe that a lot of these subjects that do not qualify for executive session need to be, I prefer to see things discussed in public so that, later on the public isn't surprised that you have a problem with this. I encourage council to discuss issues that are problems. It's sometimes difficult to begin those discussions, but at least it lets the public know that you're having a certain issue and they can anticipate, something being done with that in the future. So I think it's better to have public debate, public comment at a meeting so that you inform everybody what's happening. That's just a couple of things.
Back to the sunshine, I want to ask a couple more questions about executive sessions, but one thing I've seen a lot in communities is a text chains between board members. Tell us about that with the Sunshine Act.
The not only texting but emails, I think that one of the problem areas is when you start emailing back and forth between, or texting, I guess, between all majority of the council members, a quorum, at least a quorum, and you hit reply all. That, once you begin that type of discussion on email, that can be considered a sunshine violation, if at least that's what the word is. I'm not sure if there's any case on that, but certainly on a right to know request, if you're having those discussions between everybody, that it would be discoverable on their right to know. So, I always tell my clients not to hit the reply all. If you want to do some back and forth with individuals, go ahead and do that. But hitting that reply all really opens up you to possible sunshine violations.
Thank you. As an interim manager, when I send an email to the entire board, I put at the very top, please do not reply all.
Really? That's a good idea. I mean, again, that can be a problem area, because they're all, no matter how obvious a decision is for council to make, if you make that decision, they also, they violated, they made this decision beforehand, and you're always being accused of a sunshine law violation, even though it absolutely is not, but you'll still get accused of it no matter what. But you do have to be careful about your emails, and those are discoverable by the Right to Know Act.
Right. Thank you. Mary Ann, how do you train your board to not do those things? Especially, I mean, the email, yes, you can put the do not reply all, but what about the text?
Yeah, the text is hard. We have one for emergency. If there's a fire in the city, I notify them. It's typically one-way communication, which is what I encourage with them. If you have a specific question, text me separately, email me, call me separately. For the emails, I actually blind carbon copy everybody, so they can't reply all. But I also wanted to point out that, even going out as a group for a drink after, like a council meeting or a supervisor meeting, and let's say there's a board of 5, 3 of you go out, you have to remember that you're still a quorum at 3. So don't talk about anything you're going to be making a decision on. Don't deliberate on anything. And that can be really difficult, but we do a lot of training as soon as a new council person is elected in. I have a handbook on how this works. The solicitor comes and does a presentation on how this all works. So we really try to ingrain it early and often.
Thank you for that. I know that our time is getting short, so I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to raise their hand and ask a question. And if not, I'm going to ask a couple of questions about executive sessions, and then we're going to talk about social media for a minute. Nobody? So you both have touched a little bit on executive sessions, and so one of the things that I wanted to ask is about how we tell the public that we had an executive session. What is the legal way to let them know, and what do we have to share with the public about why?
When you go into the session, you obviously have to state the reason why. It could be general legal advice on an issue of a identifiable claim. Again, I try to be accurate on how that's presented to the public so that they absolutely know what we're talking about, the basics of it. I make sure we give a reason to the press or who's ever at the meeting. I think that's very important. And I, again, stick to the rules on that too. And if it needs to be discussed in public, discuss it in public.
Thank you. Mary Ann, what do you do in your community?
It's a dedicated agenda item. Notice of executive sessions. We say, yes, there was one on this date. We keep it just though for very general. It was for real estate. It was for personnel. It was to receive advice. We don't go into the specifics or even, it's about a lawsuit, anything like that. But again, very identifiable agenda item that's on every single agenda for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree that it just a very, very brief explanation, or it's an identifiable legal claim, and really not get into any detail at all, but, you know, just state the reasons that's permitted under the Sunshine Act.
Thank you. So one thing that we see a lot is social media. So we have, you know, there's community social media pages where we see board members commenting, and then we see, you know, we have our own social media page. And so I just wanted to touch on how we should use the page, our own page well, and then how we should be commenting when we are on other social media pages from the perspective of community as a board member or a manager. And either one of you can take this question, how you handle it, Mary Ann and Attorney Dennison, what you see from the legal side.
I tend to advise them not to get involved in social media discussions, just grow a thick skin. That's part of the job. That's what you're elected to do. And you got to let this stuff roll off. I mean, I just think you get into trouble. I mean, if you start responding and, you know, is it on your own behalf, or is it behalf of council or the board, or, you know, what is it? And they soon, I mean, you will never get these people to agree with you no matter how right you are, and they will continue to attack you. And if you just, again, engage with them, that it's only going to get worse. I would just stay away from social media comment. The only thing I would consider is, you know, if the borough council wants to put out a press release or something like that to address a situation. I've seen our, you know, borough managers do that, you know, just to kind of explain a situation, give the public, you know, some information about why we're doing things. And I think that's important, because if you don't give them a good reason, they'll come up with a reason that you don't like. So it's important to keep everybody informed. And when it gets out of control, maybe let the borough manager step in with just a press release type thing and kind of explain a situation. But not get engaged in the back and forth in social media, no.
Yeah, I agree with not engaging. We don't allow council people or the mayor to have social media pages. They have obviously their own personal ones, but not ones as representative of the city. The only social media page we have is the city manager's social media pages. So all of those things that Attorney Dennison discussed, press releases, notifications, those are all put out through the city manager social medias. And we also, you know, remind council and the mayor that they're governed under the city's employee handbook and social media policies. So they have to adhere to those. And anytime, again, council has been conditioned pretty well to say, hey, I want to post this on my own page. City manager, what do you think about that? So they know to ask before they do.
Do you allow a comment on your city social media page?
Yeah, we do. We do. Mm-hmm.
Some don't, some do. Some find out the hard way they shouldn't, but you know, I agree with looking at your handbook, because a lot of the handbooks do deal with social media and how you're supposed to deal with it. So that's a good point.
Yeah. So Mary Ann, I have time for one last question. And along with that social media and Sunshine Act and the ways we handle meetings, I just wanted to talk about how you engage the press, so that you, how your relationship is with them, so that when there are those things floating around out in social media, how do you handle your, the press so that you can get true and good information to the public?
Yeah, I mean, having a good relationship with the press is the best thing, and one of the most important things, because they will see something on social media and then call you rather than try to call everybody else around you. So we really try to answer all of the questions, do preemptive discussions with the press when something is going to come out at the next meeting. Hey, heads up, this is coming. This is the context behind it. Just have very open and truthful conversations with them. I throw a few jokes in there and they seem to really appreciate that. So the better your relationship is with the press, the smoother this goes for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. We have 4 minutes left, and like I said earlier, we like to start on time, but we also like to end on time because we know people have sacrificed their lunch break for this, and we're really grateful. I really want to touch on AI and a few other things, so I think we'll have to do that in a future discussion. But Ben, Chelsea, anybody have something that we missed or something that we want to make sure that we include in this session before we end? Are they still there?
I'm here. This is somewhat not germane, to use a parliamentary procedure terminology. But one thing that I think is really helpful organizationally, and when it comes to all the issues we've talked about, is really having clear job descriptions written not only for employees, but also the elected officials. So they understand, you know, if I want that press release, for instance, that you just mentioned, or I'm going to go comment on something in social media, like it should be in that, in your SOPs, in your handbook, in your job descriptions, essentially where those hard lines are. And kindness is clarity, or clarity is kindness in this kind of an instance. They may not like it, but it's going to really help the ethos or the sense of community of your organization if it's really clear who can do what and who should do what.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I mean, like I said, we put out handbooks, council handbooks to everybody beforehand, and it gives those very clear details of this is council's lane and this is administration's lane. So from the very beginning, there's that understanding.
Marianne, the training that you do with your board and your staff sounds really valuable. Would you be willing to do some trainings like that in the future in a lunch and learn?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Chelsea? Any other questions, comments that came through?
None so far, but also feel free to email us after the fact too. I often, you know, as I'm driving home or I'm going about my day, I will think of something like, man, I wish I would have thought about that, or wonder what they do about this or that. You can always feel free to contact us separately with your question. We're more than happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. All right, we just want to thank you very much for attending today's Lunch and Learn, and we hope that you will watch for future training sessions or time spent together in this roundtable discussion. I want to thank our panelists, Marianne Manano, Attorney Dennison, and Ben Kapperlin. Thank you all for giving us this time and your expertise so that we can share with others that are doing same and similar work. And we look forward to doing this again. Chelsea, thank you for moderating the comments. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.